This is your web app, you access to the list of the companies and loading, and finally you got the list, but too slow folks, too slow. We take a look at the logs and we found out that to display 10 companies we performed 12 queries. Unacceptable. This is very common if you don't write your JPA entities properly. Keep watching the video and I'm gonna show you how I write my JPA entities to prevent performance issues and which are the implications of fetch type and fetch mode. Hi, my name is Fabio Formosa, I'm a software architect and welcome to my channel. The issue with the company list we have seen earlier is known as n+1 query problem. I've already published another video in the channel, take a look at it if you are curious why Hibernate to display 10 list items performed 12 queries. There it's explained, watch it for further details. In this video I want to focus on how to write JPA entities and how to prevent that kind of problems. Let's use as examples two entities, company and employee. Company has a list of employees and each employee is associated to its company. In the entity company, I don't specify at all fetch mode and fetch type. By default, the fetch mode is select and fetch type is lazy, but I don't rely on them. We will see it looking at the data repository later. And the same for the entity employee, I don't specify fetch mode and fetch type. In the JPA repository, when I fetch the companies, I specify in the query that I want to retrieve the employees too, through the operator fetch join. Using the fetch join directly in the query, in my opinion, it's the best way. It has more pros than cons and I'm gonna prove it in the video. If I'm interested to fetch the companies without the employees, I can call another repository method. There are several ways of using fetch join according to your way of writing queries. We have already seen the JQL, JPA query language based way. This is based on JPA specification, the root is the company, and we use the fetch method. Lastly, the way based on criteria builder, again the root is the company and we use the fetch method. Okay, what is the major benefit of using fetch join? We are able to fetch the companies and associated employees with one only query and we have control on the query. As I said earlier, if you are not interested in to fetch the employees, you can call another repository method without the fetch join. If you don't specify fetch join writing your queries, you are delegating the ORM, Hibernate for example, to fetch the associated nested entities. Basically, Hibernate will do it for you. How does Hibernate do it for you? It depends on the fetch mode policy. Let's start from fetch mode select. Fetch mode select is the default type for one-to-many associations. If you don't specify a fetch mode, the fetch mode select is the fetch mode will be applied. If you have 10 companies, you will get 10 extra queries to fetch the employees associated to these 10 companies. So let's get back to our web app, the grid of companies. So we have a list of company names and the number of associated employees. To fetch this list, we have a main query, select from companies limit 10, and one extra query for each company to retrieve the associated employees. And this is known as n+1 query problem. We have seen fetch mode select, but what does it mean fetch type? Fetch type simply defines when these extra queries are performed. In case of fetch type eager, the extra queries are performed immediately after the main query. In case of fetch type lazy, the extra queries are performed as soon as you access to the nested collection. Typically it happens once you've got the list of companies and you convert them in DTOs. By default, the one-to-many associations have fetch type eager, instead the many-to-one associations have fetch type lazy. I never rely on fetch mode select and fetch type lazy because I don't like to delegate Hibernate to fetch the associated collections for me. I prefer to specify John fetch operator in writing queries. It results in one only query, so I prevent n+1 query problem. The many-to-one associations have fetch mode select by default, but you can change it in fetch mode join. If you call company repository find all, Hibernate will perform one-only query, joining companies and employees in a one-only query. In my opinion, fetch mode join has a major drawback. Hibernate will apply the join between the entities even when the join is not required. Let's suppose we have another grid in addition to this where we display only the companies, not the employees. We could save the cost of the join, and the join is not required here. This is the reason why I prefer not using a fetch mode join. I specify join fetch into the queries. Ideally, we can have two methods of service. One to fetch the companies with the associated employees, leveraging the query with join fetch, and another method of the service where we don't specify the operator join fetch in the query. The employees are not fetched because the nested association is lazy by default and we don't access to it. The one-to-many associations have fetch mode select by default, but we can change it in fetch mode subselect. With respect to the fetch mode select, this is an improvement because the associated employees to the companies are not fetched singularly with extra queries, but in a one-only query leveraging subselect. However, take care because fetch mode subselect can result in a more severe n+1 query problem. Let's get back to the company grid. Firstly, Hibernate performs the main query to fetch the first page of 10 companies, and later, for the employee entity, Hibernate performs another queries with a subselect. With this query, all employees which have at least one company associated are fetched in memory. The employees associated to the first page of companies are set to them. Now let's focus on the employee entity. It has a many-to-one association with the company, and remember that many-to-one associations have by default fetch type bigger, so Hibernate will retrieve the companies associated to the fetched employees. Part of these companies are already in memory, I mean the 10 companies of the first page of companies. The remaining companies are fetched singularly with an extra query. And this because the fetch mode type is select. And it's a more severe n+1 query problem. That's because the number of extra query performed are not equals to the number of first page of companies, are equals to the number of employees not associated to the first page of companies. For these reasons, I think it's a dangerous idea to rely on fetch mode subselect. I prefer another strategy to fetch the entities. I don't delegate Hibernate to fetch the associated collections. I prefer to specify join fetch writing the queries. It results in a one-only query, so I prevent n+1 query problem. Entity graph is often mentioned as a way to solve the n+1 query problem. It's a way to force Hibernate to perform a join between the entities and their nested collections. So it's an alternative way to specify explicitly the fetch join into the queries. We don't have to write the queries, we can rely on the method findAll exposed by Spring Data repositories. Personally, I still prefer writing explicitly fetch join in the queries. Entity graph is applied on the findAll method, and we cannot have two different findAll methods with two different entity graphs. I think, for example, the case in which we are interested to fetch the companies with their employees, and in another grid at the UI, we are interested only to the company list without the employees associated. Using the fetch join, I can develop two different methods. In this video, we have seen all alternatives for fetching the entities and their nested collections. We have mentioned fetch mode select, fetch mode join, fetch mode subselect. We have seen we can incur in 1+1 query problem, and I showed you my favorite approach, specifying the join fetch operator in writing queries. With this approach, we get a lot of benefits. First of all, we will fetch the entities and their nested collections with one only query. We have the flexibility to decide when to pay the cost of the join or when not to pay the cost of the join, whether or whether not we need the nested collections. And in my view, there is one only pitfall. In case of pagination, the join is performed on the all tables involved, the whole tables, and later the pagination is applied. In case of tables with millions of records, all these records are fetched in memory, and that can cause performance issues in memory. There are some mitigations to solve. I will explain them, but not in this video, in the next one, if you give me a like here in this video. I'm curious to know which is your favorite approach. How do you fetch the entities? Share it in the comments, please. That's it for now. See you in the next video and have your bit well aligned.